Welcome to another episode of Women Investing in Women. I am super excited for Robin and I to introduce our guest today. But most importantly, I want us to remind ourselves why we do this week after week after week. As women, we are the anchor and center of homes, families, communities, and human civilization itself. We as women, as we anchor everything that is human, we don't have a support system to anchor us professionally or societally because we have to do all of that on the side as a sidebar. Even the very definition of work doesn't include the unpaid work that is worth over $1 billion a day we women do. So at this stage in human civilization where women are called to do more, it is so much more important for us to come together, pitch in our strengths, share our resources, and lift each other up, because it's only together we're going to go places. And it is only together we're going to make our mark. And how we lift each other up is how we are going to help build our societies, raise our children, and leave this place a better world. So I am eternally grateful for all the women who are joining Robin and I on this journey, because it's going to take all of us to change history and write her story one woman at a time. Take it away, Robin.
Absolutely. I am so delighted to have Jaime Shapiro with us. I met Jaime during COVID, just like this, over Zoom, where she was part of a wonderful presentation connected with Claremont University and the positive organizational scholarship and positive psychology work that comes out of there and the leadership work. And I was so impressed with her that I absolutely want to be connected to her. I'm so glad that she's part of our meeting today. She's been part of the corporate world. She's a founder and CEO of Connected EC. And congratulations, just got her PhD a couple of weeks ago. She'll be wearing her hood in May. We're so proud of her. And your work is really focused and centered on leadership, on transforming organizations, positive organizational scholarship. And your leadership, your studies you were sharing focused on energy, leaders and energy. And so why don't you share with us a little bit about what you do and what motivates you in that direction, and some of the slices of the pie that particularly pertain to women leaders and how they can evolve in the world.
Yeah. Well, my research and my practice was birthed out of my own experience, honestly, as a female leader and executive, and watching my own cycles of giving everything to the organization and then burning out, and then going into another cycle of giving and burning out and replenishing. And it just felt like there had to be a different model out there. And as you were sharing, as women, we have so much that we give all of the time, from community to family to our organizations. And so my passion is all around leadership vitality, making sure that we have the physical, psychological, and emotional energy available to self to be able to then give to others. And what my research has shown, as well as my coaching and my practice has shown, is that when we care for ourselves, when we actually pour that energy into self, our leadership capacity expands and we can give so much more without going into those cycles of burnout. I look at the spectrum. If burnout is in one category, then leadership vitality is on the other side of that. So I think as women, because we are holding so much in the workplace, in our communities, in our families, it's very easy to get into that place of complete service to others without serving self first. So that's what sparked my work in connecting the dots between leadership and well-being. And it's really been a joy of mine to both practice that and also to research that.
Beautiful.
Beautiful, beautiful introduction to what brought you to where you are today, Jaime. And congratulations, Dr. Jaime. I cannot wait to see you in your, the hooding ceremony. As we build on this theme of vitality,
Yes.
So many women get out of the workforce to start a family. So many women get out of the workforce to care for a loved one. And there is no entry point, right? Re-entry point is not there. I just saw a Fortune 100 company, a client of mine, who only gives 3 to 4 weeks of maternity leave for women, are giving their male executives 3 months sabbatical, right? So there is such a inequity in this process, and the process itself forces women to self-select out because they're the only ones who can give birth. They're the only ones who can be a caregiver, right? So nature's gift to women somehow in a man-made rules of engagement world forces women to self-select out. What are some of your thoughts on how we can shift this?
Yeah.
Because no man came into this earth without a woman. I mean, their mothers birthed them. How do we create space for women? Because if women start choosing not to have children, which is already happening in the developed countries, population is going to completely diminish, and the United States is going to look like Japan with robots for significant other. How do we change the culture and get to a different place?
That's a big question. And I wish I had all the answers to that question, but I'd love to share some of my learnings along the way and some of my perspectives. One of the things that I saw shift during the pandemic that I want to make sure we don't lose sight of is that we started to bring more of our whole selves and more of our humanity into the workplace. And so while we were all on these screens, we started to see into each other's lives and the different responsibilities that we all have. And I think that's in all aspects of life, and that pertains to both men and women. You know, you started to see kids show up and pets show up, and there was this opening I saw that was like, oh, right. We're human beings. We have lives outside of our four walls of the workplace. And there started to be more of an openness and acceptance. And I started to see a shift in leadership. I started to see a shift in how we were treating each other. I started to see a shift in our empathy and our curiosity and our humility. So not that there weren't a lot of things that happened during the pandemic, obviously, that were absolutely horrible. But that's one silver lining that I saw that I think we need to continue. We need to actually have more of the conversations in our workplace that celebrates the human beings. And when we talk about positive organizational psychology and we talk about human thriving in the workplace, to me, that's the whole human. That's not just who you are at work. That's the whole human. And thinking about how do we not only shift who we are as people and leaders in the workplace, but then how do we shift the systems around that? So when we have systems that are broken, that are not equitable, how do we shift those at an organizational level? How do we create that flexibility for people to say, yes, I can work for this organization and I can be a fulfilled mother and feel like I'm able to do that? Or yes, I can be a caregiver and I have that flexibility and autonomy to be able to do that. And we know with autonomy and that flexibility, what we're seeing in the research is that's actually creating more productivity, more engagement, but it's finding that balance in this new way of working. And many organizations have started to move to a hybrid way of working. And so how do we leverage that for even more equitable systems, processes, and ways of working? So I wish I could tell you I have all the answers. That would be amazing if I did. But I think part of it is not losing sight of the learnings that we've had through this very difficult time and understanding how we bring more of that humanity every single day.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie.
Really, really great insights. And this whole notion of COVID shaking the world up and letting us see, hey, like as you say, there's kids showing up in the screen. I have a neighbor who said there used to be that if his child happened to walk into the screen, he'd be worried he'd get fired. And now it's like, okay, everybody knows, everybody has kids and pets. And so what do you think are some of the, what have you experienced as far as some of the challenges as far as being able to create more equity, create a sense of, yes, I can show up and if my child shows up in the screen, I'm not going to get fired. How can you see, at least the research you've done, the companies you've interviewed, the people you work with, ways of opening that up?
Ways of opening it up and challenges is what I think that I heard in the question, right? Like, how do we step into this even more effectively? And then what are the barriers? I'm going to talk about the barriers first. I think leadership has evolved so much and ways of working have evolved so much. But the fact is that there are a lot of old paradigms in leadership that need to shift. And we're still learning how to shift those. And one of those is around, what we've been talking about with just being open and vulnerable. That was not as accepted, especially when I was growing up in the corporate world. I have to say, like, there are messages that were, don't ever show your emotion, don't show how much you care, don't ever let your personal life creep in. So there's all of these messages that are just flat out wrong that I think many of us were conditioned to believe. And so some of it is like unwiring and recognizing that that is actually not the model of leadership that we are finding is most connecting, most trust building, most engaging, most inspiring. And we have the research now that shows these different styles of leadership that are more open, more accessible, more real, create more high performing teams. But for many of us, we were wired to believe differently. And so it's having to like rewire and put ourselves out there in new ways that I think is challenging, especially as women. And I felt for a very long time that my feminine leadership style was something I had to hide, right? That I had to conform and change who I was in order to be successful. And that's just not true, right? And so I think a lot of us have to be pretty darn vulnerable as we start stepping out of that old paradigm and into more of our authentic leadership, and know that that is the way that we can be, that is going to be best for our well-being, but also best for our leadership performance. So I think that's one barrier. I know there are many others, but that's one barrier that I've seen. And then the access points to continue to do this. In my work, I do a lot of team cohesion coaching and really focused on how do we really build high performing teams. And one of the most important things in the foundation is around trust and psychological safety. Psychological safety being more how we describe the climate or culture, trust how we, talk about the individual relationships with each other. But the more we can do that, the better. And so when I think about helping teams be better, what is at the core of that is connection. How do we build connection? How do we create a climate and culture of psychological safety? So I think when we look through that lens and we ask that question, we have the opportunity to really create more access points to creating more humanity in the workplace.
It's a great answer. It's great.
Brilliant elements, Jamie. I love the fact that you brought in trust and psychological safety. Without psychological safety, there is no opportunity to build trust. And psychological safety allows for a culture that actually can challenge the status quo, ask nuanced questions, and ask, why can't we do things differently? Why can't we look at leadership differently? So in a culture that has psychological safety, what would it take for women leaders? There are only a few in every organization, to lift other women up. The reason I ask this question is the business world has created artificially a scarcity mentality for women. There are only so many seats for women. So in a scarcity mentality, if I'm at the top, I don't want to open the door because somebody is going to come and knock me off my chair. So organizational psychological safety is one thing, but in a culture of scarcity, how do then women allow for that to permeate in their way they show up, the way they lift each other up? Because to me, that is where the rubber meets the road for women to lift each other up.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that it really starts with us and our mindset. And I firmly believe in a concept Sean Aker talks about around creating a constellation of stars, and recognizing when we have a mindset of abundance, and we recognize that if I shine, it just helps you shine brighter. When you shine, it helps me shine brighter. And that this isn't about scarcity. This isn't about when you're shining, it's dimming my light. It's that we get to shine brighter together. The more we as women really take on that mindset and ask, how do I shine that light? How do I reach one hand forward, one hand back, really help uplift as many people as I can? Then what happens is we create that constellation. And that's what your work is doing with this podcast, right? You're creating a constellation of us to help us shine even brighter with each other, recognizing that our light just grows brighter when we connect. And so I think that mindset shift has to happen, and moving out of scarcity into abundance, to me, is how I think about it. And I often think about it as like above the line, below the line, right? If we are women that are above the line, we are thinking about how do we create more opportunities? How do we shine together collectively? How do we illuminate the path for each other? When I encounter below the line women, then I'm very conscious of that, because I want to help uplift them, but I also want to make sure energetically that we're caring for each other the best way possible. And so I have learned along the way that I want to keep investing that energy in that constellation where we're all focused on uplifting each other, and recognizing that we can shine brighter together.
That's great. Yeah, I was going to say, have you seen a difference between generations? Like, is there a generational thing where women, well, like maybe even my generation, I'm 66, by the way, or older, have a different mindset toward helping women in the corporate world versus younger women? And also, maybe this is a two-pronged question. I know your scholarship is big on vitality. Do you find different areas of vitality with women than with men? Is there a different element, a different aspect, a different texture, so to speak, of vitality? So looking at it from a couple of different ways. I know I've thrown questions at you at the same time. Sorry.
Questions at me. So I'm gonna talk about the second question, and then we can go back to the first one, which is, do I see gender differences in my vitality research? The answer right off the cuff with my quantitative and my qualitative research is I have not found significant differences in what drains and builds vitality and how that vitality is used in leadership between men and women. But in my practice, what I have found is that when I'm working with women leaders, there tends to be more drains on their vitality because they feel pulled in so many different directions. So, in my practice, I am seeing differences. In my just pure research at this moment, I'm not seeing it, not because I don't think it's there, but I'm not sure I'm asking the right questions yet to have it emerge truly in the data. And so as I continue down this path of understanding leader vitality, I do want to understand it not only from, different genders, but also different races and ethnicities, and really understand this construct from different lenses. And so I think there's a lot to learn from looking at this concept from so many different angles, and I just haven't found it yet, but I'm going to continue to research and explore that. So, and then the multi-generational question you asked me, I'm going to circle back, which is around, am I seeing differences in how women are uplifting women across generations? And my answer is no. I see the biggest difference in mindset. People have different mindsets. And so I have been so fortunate in my own career through, I can start with my mom and how she has inspired me to be the woman I am today, to my fourth grade teacher, who was like the first person in my academic life that was like, I see something in you, right? I see something in you, and made me feel seen, heard, and acknowledged. So I can just, point to my whole path and say, along the way, I've had so many different women support me, and it has not been at all related to age. It has just been focused on, is this a woman that wants to uplift other women or not? And I think that goes across like every generation. The one thing I have seen generationally is that for those of us who grew up in old paradigms, they're a little harder to unwind. And I do see the generations behind us just so inspiring in how they look at leadership and what they're asking for from leadership and what they expect from an authenticity, vulnerability perspective, how they are really forcing leadership to answer the question of purpose and meaning. And so there's so many things about the generations behind us that with their ability to see what's possible that maybe we didn't see when we were growing up in the workplace. So that's where I see the biggest differences.
Great.
Such an interesting nuance you surface, Jaime. So as we bring this to a close, I want us to take a step back. The younger generation was raised by the older generation, right? So they are so much more in tune because they saw how much sacrifices their mothers made and how they were left behind. So they've learned from their mother's experience how not to become their mother in the workplace. Therefore, they're asking the right questions. So kudos to them. So at some level, our generation has raised socially, emotionally aware and responsive children who are now coming into the workplace and saying, okay, let's address this, let's address that. So this is how generational change happens. That makes me happy. Yeah. What are 3 pointers you have for different generations of women to hold hands and lift each other up and make every generation better than the last one? Because that's the only way we're going to make change.
It's the only way we're going to make change. So one pointer I have is I'm a mother. I'm a mother of 2. Jack is 13 and Ella is 11. And I think we have to continue to role model what it means to be in the workplace and be leaders in the workplace, and also not sacrifice ourselves as mothers, and make sure that we're teaching our children how to do the same. And I'm very proud when I decided to embark on, taking on a PhD while I was running a company. I sat down with my kids and I asked the question. I said, hey, I want to share with you this dream I have. And it's only a dream that I want to go after if it feels like it's going to work for you as kiddos. And this is a big deal for you to have a working mom and then have a working mom that's taking on a PhD. Can we talk about this as a family? And I think when we role model that openness and say, hey, I don't have all the answers. I may be your mom and I may be a lot older than you, but I don't know everything. And if this is something you think is not great for our family, let's talk about it. And I will never forget that moment, because my kids said to me, Mom, if this is your dream, there's no better time than to do it now. And that conversation for me was so empowering for me as a mother, but I felt like it was also a way for us to role model. How do we do this in partnership? How do we do this in community? And I'm super passionate about workplaces being places of community. And so that's number 2. So number 1, let's role model for our kids. What's this look like? We don't have all the answers. We're on a learning journey and we're always going to be growing and learning. So let's role model that. 2 is let's focus on our businesses being communities. We spend 2/3 of our waking life with the people we work with. Let's focus on community. When we focus on this being our community, we just have more of an orientation of locking arms and being together. And then the 3rd thing I'll say is the wisdom that I was given long ago, which is 1 hand forward, 1 hand back. How do you reach up and say, I need help, and be vulnerable and say, hey, I need your support, and open yourself up to that? And then how do you also uplift others around you and have that mindset of abundance and just 1 hand forward, 1 hand back all of the time?
Thank you. Thank you. Any closing thoughts you have, Robin, as we bring this to a beautiful end?
Well, I'm just really excited. I'm excited to read your research, your dissertation when it's finally published. But just the notion of leadership and vitality and expanding that for women so they can have that balance of a family life and work life, however that spectrum shifts. I was a stay-at-home mom for about 15 years, even though I had my MBA and then got back into the workforce. But I'm just really excited about hearing about vitality and leadership and this notion of one hand forward, one hand back. Everything that you've said, I just think is really terrific. So we're looking forward to following you.
Oh, thank you. It's been a joy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It has been such an honor to have this conversation. And Robin and I know that we're going to stay in touch with you. We are going to continue to make you a part of this Women Investing in Women community, because as you said, it is the constellation, right? I always give the analogy, if each of us can light up what is around us, imagine if we all lined up. If we all lined up, we can create a runway for every woman to take off and land on her dreams. And how do we do that? That is what we are trying to do here. And as we bring this amazing conversation to a close, we want to make sure that you all go and check out Amy's contact information on our YouTube channel, which we will be making available. And if you don't do anything else, do one thing for yourself. Let your light shine, and let that light light up another woman's life.